So are you implying that the excess deaths were caused by the vaccine?
I don't bloody well know what they were caused by.
Okay, but that's what you're implying now.
Well, that's... look, if you're going to use Occam's razor, you're kind of stuck in an awkward place here.
I am absolutely not. This is the most administered vaccine or inoculation, whatever you want to call it, in the history of all mankind. Every single organization is motivated to call this out if it was a bad thing. You don't think Russia or China would be screaming if Donald Trump or the United States warp sped through a vaccine that was having deleterious effects on populations around the world? You don't think there wouldn't be some academic institution? You don't think there wouldn't be more than a handful of doctors and Joe Rogan and some conservatives saying this vaccine might have been bad? If it was the case that American companies working with companies in Europe and Germany especially, right, because that's where biotech is from, in order to create and manufacture a vaccine that was causing excess deaths around the world, there are so many different people who would be motivated to call this out. How do
They are calling it out.
It's a handful of people. Where are the governments? Where are the academic institutions calling it out? Where are the other private companies calling it out? Wouldn't you stand to make a killing if you were a private company in Europe and you could say, hey look, mRNA vaccines for sure are causing all these issues. Why wouldn't Putin? Why wouldn't Xi Jinping? Why wouldn't anybody else in the world call this out if it was as horrible as it was?
There are plenty of people attempting to call it out.
Nobody credible, no huge institution.
What do you make of the excess deaths? You haven't come up with a bloody hypothesis.
I don't even know if there are 20% excess deaths in Europe right now. If I had to guess off the top of my head, it's gonna be like you said. One might be lingering effects of an overwhelmed healthcare system. One might be deaths related to the war in Ukraine. Another one might be rising energy costs that for a couple of reasons.
But it's absolutely impossible that any of it could be unintended consequences of a novel technology injected into billions of people.
I think, first of all, there aren't billions of people in Europe, so if there were excess deaths...
I never said there were!
I understand, but you're talking about excess deaths in Europe. I'm not aware of excess deaths occurring in other places that are completely and totally unaccounted for, where the only explanation would be the vaccine. I think if it were, more people would be talking about it!
We have to! Well, first of all, the number of people talking about something is not an indication of the scientific validity of a claim.
I agree with that.
Why are you using mass consensus as the determinative of what constitutes truth?
Because I think
that's never been the case.
Because I think for something that was given to billions and billions of people, if it was something that was having a measurable effect on people, it would be impossible to cover it up and ignore it. We wouldn't have to look at the one case brought up in a documentary.
Well,
we wouldn't have to look at the one thing being talked about.
What do you make of the VAERS data?
VAERS is not the gold standard for determining whether a vaccine is working or not.
Compared to what?
Compared to the actually longitudinal, prospective, randomized, controlled trial studies.
You mean like the ones they should have done to the goddamn vaccine?
Like the ones they did do for the vaccine.
Oh yes!
And continue to do to this day. That is correct. Yes.
You really think you're in a position to evaluate the scientific credibility of trials for the vaccine, do you?
No, I don't. So I have
what
to trust.
Are you doing?
I have to trust.
I don't trust them. I've looked at the bloody data.
First of all, you have to trust third parties to some extent when you go.
I don't have to trust third parties.
Of course you do. You do every day. When you turn the keys in your car, you hope the engine doesn't explode. When you're drinking water, you hope that the public water or whatever tap or bottle you got it out of isn't contaminated or poisoned with cholera.
I don't do that as a consequence of consensus.
No, you do. Of course you do.
No, I don't. I do that as a consequence of observing multiple times that when I put the goddamn key in the ignition, the truck started.
How do you know it's gonna start the 50th or 100th times? How many times do you have to...
Don't play Hume with me!
I'm not playing Hume!
You know perfectly well why.
You don't know if the denim in those jeans isn't leaking into your bloodstream. To some extent, we have to trust third-party institutions to make determinations.
Except when they use force.
How about when they use force? We trust police officers.
Oh, we do.
Trust the judicial system.
We on the left trust the police.
To some extent, if someone's breaking
That's why we defund
not only thunder,
them.
but if somebody's breaking into your house, you could be the most defund person in the world. Who you gonna call? You're gonna call Joe Biden. You're gonna call Obama. You're gonna call the Black Panthers. No, you're gonna call the cops.